The breaking news that just came down in the NFL, Tom Pelissero of the NFL Network reports that the Broncos are finalizing a deal with Packers offensive coordinator Nathaniel Hackett to make him their new head coach. Per sources, he said contract talks heated up Wednesday night. The Jags plan to interview Hackett again today. Instead, Denver lands its top choice. So there it is. Round of applause. Brady Quinn called this last week or the week before.
Yes, he did.
You see some of us here build each other up, and others don't. But it is Nathaniel Hackett, the offensive coordinator of the Packers, is now in Denver as their head coach, the first head coach off the board in the NFL. So there's that.
Feels like the stars are aligning. I do feel like this will be the domino effect, too, for coaches being hired in the NFL. I think Brian Daboll's up next. It sounds like things are heating up for him in Miami. Byron Leftwich, things are heating up with the Jacksonville Jaguars. The Bears are still going through, their interview process. The Vikings clearly wanted to hire a general manager before they hired their head coach. So I think that'll come at some point. But it's been interesting. It's been interesting how, and I think, Jonas, you brought this up yesterday, it's been a little more patient process than I think what we're accustomed to. There's been times where there's been coaches or assistants on staffs that are still playing that, it was the worst kept secret out there, right? Kyle Shanahan to the 49ers was one of the worst kept secrets. And, I understand the reasoning for, why you obviously can't hire the guy before, he's actually done coaching for the team he's with, especially if they're still playing. But in this case, it's been a slower process. Maybe that's good too, casting a wider net for some of these organizations. The reality is this could very well be the domino effect that starts the hiring process for a bunch of other teams out there. But I also think it sets up the potential for something else to occur in the future.
What do you think that might be? You think there could be a potential quarterback move?
I'm saying if you are Aaron Rodgers right now and you are contemplating a bunch of things, trying to figure out what the Packers are going to do. And again, this is something we talked about yesterday, LaVar. And one of the things about, separate from Aaron Rodgers' decision of what he wants to do, there's probably no better time for the Packers to rebuild. I mean, given their cap situation, and I've listened to some say, well, if you just cut Preston Smith as a Darius Smith, okay, but those are some really good players. and so how does that help you? And then and even in that light, you still have to extend Rashawn Gary. You still have to extend Jared Alexander. That doesn't, they're $44 million over the cap, and that doesn't include whatever you do with Davante Adams. So it really could be more than that, depending on his franchise tag number, which I think the projection I saw was $20 million. So if that's the case, that you're at 64 now. I mean, and you could send him to a long-term extension if he wanted to do that. But there's a lot of questions about what Davante Adams wants to do amongst what Aaron Rodgers is going to do.
Would Denver be able to bring him in?
Well, I mean, that's for another conversation. I think there'd have to be a lot of moving parts in order for that to happen. But if you could trade both Adams and Rodgers to the Broncos, I mean, you're talking about there would have to be players in exchange for that. There would be a boatload of draft picks. But I think the only thing that works in your favor if you're Denver of not having to mortgage too much of your future is, they could say to Rodgers, look, he's on a one-year deal. Or the Packers, excuse me. He's on a one-year deal. That's all he's got left on his contract. And he's 30, 38, 39?
Yeah.
Somewhere.
Yeah.
So he's at an age where it's like, we don't know how much longer he's going to play, so we can't give you as much as you want for him. Now, Adams is a different story. Davante Adams could warrant a lot, even though we have seen wide receivers, not go for quite as much as we thought at times, right? Diggs went for, a first, a second, a third and fifth. I mean, there was a package.
What's his contract? What is his contract? How many years does he have left?
He's done.
Davante Adams?
Yeah, he's
unrestricted free agent.
So they can't. Well, I mean, so they wouldn't be able to trade him then.
Well, no. The thought would be you'd tag him, and so at a minimum, it gives you at least one more year with him. If you can't work out, during that period of time, a long-term extension, but at least you have control.
All right. So let me ask you this: if they tagged him, would the value of what Green Bay would be asking for exceed what that average is of what he would get on that franchise tag?
Yeah. Well, he would get more annually than that, right?
Yeah.
Because
He'd
Amari
probably get somewhere in the ballpark of 22 a year.
Yeah, Amari got 20, right?
What I'm saying is, for Green Bay, would it make sense to match the offer, right? Because unless they restrict him, right? If they restrict him, then he can't. Help me, educate me on it, because
he'll receive the exclusive franchise tag, so there will not be anyone else who can match the offer.
That can match the offer.
Right.
Okay.
His recourse would be, I could say, I'm not like Le'Veon Bell. I'm not going to show up. I'm not going to play for you.
But then again, for Denver, does that exceed what they would be able to provide to get him? Because if they provided that, then you got to perceivably think that if it's time for Green Bay to do a rebuild, well, what would be better than to say, all right, we're going to lose Davante anyway. If we're going to lose him and we're going to lose Aaron, let's get as much out of Denver as we possibly can, and then we can justify a rebuild. We could get a couple good players in exchange. We could get some good draft pick choices. I mean, with that would seem to be feasible if that is indeed the case.
See, but I don't. Why would Denver trade for Davante Adams if he's going to be a free agent? I mean, if Green Bay, and I don't think it would make,
that you can get Aaron Rodgers to come there.
But I understand. But I think that you could get Aaron Rodgers if you just if you were going to sign Davante Adams, if Green Bay was going to let him walk, because it doesn't make sense for Green Bay to franchise tag Davante Adams or give him a big time contract if Aaron Rodgers is leaving. Why would you commit that much money when you already have cap problems?
Because you still have a quarterback. First off, signing him to an extension actually helps your cap, because you've got creative ways, and you always hear the phrase cash over cap. As long as you put a good portion of that into the signing bonus, you can reduce, and especially if you back end load the contract, you can reduce a lot of what their salary cap issues are here in the short term. Now, you're kind of kicking the can down the road, but you also could move on from the player at that point if he isn't developing the chemistry with Jordan Love, or he's not the same player without Aaron Rodgers, right? So actually giving him an extension would help their cap situation, because of how they could structure it to reduce the number where, if he's under the franchise tag, he counts $20 million against the cap. That number goes up to 64, as we talked about. But you could structure it in a manner in which he might only have 10 or 12 that hit the cap. So in theory, you're actually reducing the amount that would be hitting the cap, as opposed to franchise tagging him by extending him in this instance.
I mean, that division. Let's just say, the Raiders want to make a move, all right? And say the Raiders are looking around going, all right, we want to move on from Derek Carr. We want to make a move. And say they, one of the teams that was on Russell Wilson's list was the Raiders from last year. Could you imagine a division, and it's not that far-fetched, to think Mahomes, Justin Herbert, Aaron Rodgers, and Russell Wilson in the same division? That's not that far-fetched. That has a legitimate possibility of happening. That's going to be a fun division to watch. And so if you follow the trail here, and Nathaniel Hackett getting this opportunity to take over in Denver, him and Aaron Rodgers are close. They'd like to work together. This just feels like the perfect match, that something would get done. And Denver's got a top 10 pick they can part with, and whatever else they can. Because, look, I know Albert...
They've got 9 picks this year.
Yeah, so I would imagine a couple of those are going back to Green Bay. This gets done. And they were the favorite to land Aaron Rodgers.
Outside of him going back with Green Bay.
Yeah. So
but like I said before, I think it has to do a little bit with, if you just look at the situation for the Packers, there's probably not a cleaner time to say, all right, let's start over and rebuild. All right, like you didn't make it back to the NFC Championship game or a Super Bowl with Aaron. It's at a time in his career where he's got a year left. He's coming off an back-to-back MVP seasons. What else can you trade him and get as much for him? I mean, he's only going to be another year older if you hang on to him for another year. And in that case, though, he'd be going to be a free agent. But I think the hard part with that is you've already spent 2 years not having really much of a clue what Jordan Love can or will be. I mean, there was an idea, and we talked about this yesterday, it being floated out that they want to extend Aaron Rodgers 2 more years. Well, what the heck are you doing with Jordan Love then? Because at that point in time, if you're extending him, you're expecting him to be there and play. And so you're essentially walking into a player who's got a 4-year deal with a 5th-year option that's fully guaranteed that you've got to make a decision on, at some point after year 3.
And how much trade value does he have? What if he was an option to put on the trade block?
I don't think there's any.
None.
I mean, what you'd say is okay, what's Jordan Love in this quarterback draft class? Would you rather have Jordan Love, or would you rather have one of these quarterbacks? And that's where maybe there's a thought or value to what you could get for Jordan Love.
Yeah, because I think he's comparable, if not better.
I wouldn't put him at. I mean, his last year was bad in college football. Now he's got a couple years of seasoning now, and that might change how teams look at him. But you had to go back to his what was it? I believe his sophomore year because he came out early. I mean, it's that's the hard thing is film wise, Kenny Pickett's got the best tape, so I still wouldn't put him ahead of Kenny Pickett.
Okay.
But again, that's all. That's assuming
Not
a lot
comparable.
of things. That's assuming too that Brian Gutekunst is willing to say, "Hey, I made a bad mistake. I thought Aaron Rodgers couldn't play at MVP level. Clearly, he can." Like I don't know. I mean, is a general manager going to do that?
Maybe. I mean, I'm looking at it. If this is the time for a rebuild, and well, in theory, if it's time for a rebuild, then you do try to move on from Aaron Rodgers.
From all of it, honestly.
But they've come up short too, by the way. I mean, whether you're looking at it from what's next without Aaron Rodgers, I mean, you've only been good enough to make it to, which is good. I mean, which is great, honestly. But you haven't won the Super Bowl. Like they get ousted in their first round this year, which it was a divisional round. But then they lose in the divisional championship the year before. I mean, they're coming up short. It's not like a Tom Brady scenario where you have the recency effect of saying, okay, you're looking at it and they're not too far fresh off of getting a Super Bowl. They keep coming up short anyway, so maybe it is time to do a rebuild. It's not going to be pretty, I'll tell you that. They're going to go further away from where they are right now. They're closer to winning a Super Bowl than they would be, to me, if they got rid of Aaron Rodgers. But
it feels like they're similar to New Orleans, where, look, the window is probably closed.
It might be closed.
Yeah, I mean, and that's where New Orleans finds themselves.
The only problem is New Orleans is in a worse cap situation somehow.
That's not even a window anymore. They're not even in the vehicle like that.
And they don't have their head coach right now. That's how bad it is.
Yeah. By the way, Drew Brees crippled their cap and then got paid buku bucks from NBC to take that gig. So, but listen, it's all good. He got a piece of notebook paper with the yards record on it for Monday Night Football. So he's fine. Everything's fine with Drew Brees.